Welcome to BVTV Sales and Marketing Today, coming to you from the UK studios of BizVision. I'm your host, Malcolm Gallagher. Now, what makes for entrepreneurial success? I've asked that perhaps 500 times in interviews in the last few years, and as you would expect, got many different answers. But the one element of success that's nagged me for years, and which I totally believe in, is emotional intelligence. Sometimes concepts idle around for a while, slowly gathering use and awareness, sort of nice to do rather than must do. Then suddenly something happens that propels that concept to the top of mind of most people. Yes, I'm talking about emotional intelligence, a key need in today's altered world. And in my mind, an essential skill in an entrepreneur. Well, my guest today also thinks that way. After all, she's written the book about it. The Entrepreneur Advantage, Emotional Intelligence for Building and Growing a Business. So please meet Elizabeth Miner. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hello, Malcolm. How are you today?
Oh, brilliant. I'm looking forward to this challenge, chat, because I'm so much a believer in emotional intelligence. But where are you today?
At this moment, I am in Denver, Colorado in the US. I get on a plane very shortly for Salt Lake City, Utah.
Yeah, now you did tell me that before we went on air, but then you also did tell me something that's gobsmacked me. You're a digital nomad. What is one of those?
Yes, I am a digital nomad, a location independent businesswoman, intentionally homeless, however you want to call it, but I'm a full-time traveler. So about 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, I packed up the few things that I had and sold everything else and just went on the road and I just follow my bliss, my joy.
No, before we get started, I know my viewers and listeners have got to say, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. So listen, what do you travel with? I mean, how many suitcases?
I have one carry-on, one backpack, and a briefcase. And yes, for those ladies, I do miss my shoe collection. That is my biggest regret about being a nomad. But other than that, I love the lifestyle where I can go wherever I wish and do my work from wherever I please.
Listen, I'm full of praise for you, but I was just trying to work out how I did that myself and thinking I'm going to do one little case like that. Well, yeah, maybe for a day or so, but what a challenge. I mean, and you know, do you ever sort of have to think, well, I maybe need to take something more today, or no? It's just
Well, I mean, I have a little bit of everything. And then, as I move about the world, sometimes I will leave things in one location and pick up new things in a new location. So it just depends.
wow, yeah. I'm just looking at my book collection and thinking, well, that's 6 suitcases already.
Right, right. I have moved over to the Kindle. Yes,
Yeah.
I can't get rid of the books, but I
No.
can get rid of the luggage weight. So that's how
Right.
I do it.
Okay. Well, I'm dying and looking forward to talking to you about your book. Now, viewers and listeners, I'm going to be chatting to Elizabeth in a different format today rather than my usual 3 parts. The reason for this change is that I totally believe that her subject matter is of such importance that I want to extract some of the interview for our new BVTV Spotcat collection, including Silverpreneur and BVTV Entrepreneur. Elizabeth, before we get into my set of questions, can you briefly tell us, introduce yourself to my viewers and listeners. Who is Elizabeth Miner and what's your book about?
So my background is 20 plus years as a corporate paralegal. I did work with entrepreneurs and startups and then moved into multinationals. When that became something that was not fulfilling enough, I moved into coaching and many of my clients wanted to build businesses. So I moved into the business coaching space and was able to leave the corporate world. And since then, when I figured out I could do that from anywhere in the world, I became a location independent international business coach. I have the multinational experience and I coach people around the globe from wherever I am.
Lovely, isn't it? That's freedom. Have passport, will travel. Okay.
Yes, well, in a pre-COVID world and hopefully in a post-COVID world, have passport will travel.
Yes.
Right. So yes, and the book, it's really everything that it says in the subtitle. It's emotional intelligence for building and growing your business. This is something that I believe is so imperative, as you said, for entrepreneurs. And I think it's actually imperative for everyone,
Mm,
but I focused in on how entrepreneurs can use it, because entrepreneurship is such a unique beast. And there are so many unique nuances to it. And one of my clients said to me at one point, she said, if you're ever wondering if you have skeletons in your closet, go ahead, start a business. They'll all come crashing out.
yes. That's for true. I know.
Right?
I didn't. Yeah, I nearly broke my head on the never mind. But let's get started on talking about EI, or emotional intelligence. Now, first, help me sort some confusion out for everybody. What is EQ, emotional quotient, and emotional intelligence, and are they interchangeable?
Well, emotional quotient, or EQ, is really kind of the measurement of emotional intelligence, and as I understand it. And emotional intelligence, in my definition, is really how we show up in the world, how we interact and 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 intersect with the world, and it's the lens through which we see the world. The more
Mm,
that we understand that and are emotionally intelligent about how we see and interact with the world, the better we can make choices and intentionally do things. And there's so much of that that happens kind of on autopilot, or um, historical stories that we rerun in our world.
yeah, yeah. Now, one of the things that I've faced over the years is that talking about emotional intelligence to leaders, they don't like the word emotion. That sounds like weakness,
Yes.
So why, though, is emotional intelligence suddenly so important within an entrepreneurial business?
Well, it's not suddenly so important, but suddenly we're recognizing it. Suddenly we're recognizing a lot of things, right? So, and I think with the shift in the millennials coming in,
Mm,
and their desire to really connect with their business and connect with the work that they're doing, I think we're opening up the door for more people to understand different things. And the world is changing and evolving. We no longer have two genders. I don't even know how many genders we have anymore. So, I've lost count, right? And there's so many different things. And so if you're not emotionally intelligent, you're not prepared to manage the workforce that is showing up today. And that's really dangerous and limiting to your business.
yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong at all, by the way, leaders, in showing your emotion, in showing that you're a conscious person as well. Now, in my early days of learning emotional intelligence, and blending it into my leadership programs, not as thoroughly as you, but introducing it, I learned that around 70-80% of success is down to your emotional quotient, and only 20-30% technical skills. Do you think that ratio is still relevant, or was it a fake news ratio? And if it's relevant, why?
I definitely think it's still relevant. And I don't know the exact breakdown, but, skills, I'm going to kind of contradict myself, but skills can be taught.
Hmm.
Now, emotional intelligence, I too believe, can be taught. And its basis is self-awareness. So it's a matter of, are you willing to kind of unlock that closet and see what kinds of things are driving your behavior? But yeah, it's absolutely relevant, because it does drive how you show up in business, how you lead, how you manage, and how you approach risks, decision making, all the things that are filled with your day as a business person, and specifically an entrepreneur.
Mm. Yeah. So what do entrepreneurial leaders find hardest about emotional intelligence? And does that difficulty differ between those ages and the unknown number of agendas?
So, geez, it, there's some resistance, as you mentioned, to the term emotional when we actually start to dig into what does that mean. And when I start to give stories and examples, people start to understand, oh, okay, I don't like the term. So if we can move away from the term emotional intelligence, and by using EQ, it kind of allows that to move to the side, I get less pushback. But in terms of, is there a difference between the genders? I think females are generally more open to it, but I think everybody, once they understand how it can benefit them, I think everybody is really interested and available to it if they're willing to do the work. And it is work, and it's not a tangible physical bottom line number that you can quantify. And that seems to be the biggest hurdle I think people have in spending the time and energy for it in their entrepreneurial journey.
Yes, I know. They all want to measure too much, don't they? I think you could measure it in some ways, like how many staff you keep, you retain rather than lose.
Right. Those are types of things that are benefits to this, but it's kind of immeasurable as to, was it through your emotional intelligence and your great leadership, or was it because the job is great and fulfilling?
Yeah. So many ways, so benefits once you really start getting down to it. So, but Elizabeth, before we go to your next question, let me just remind viewers and listeners of your website URL, which is, and viewers, you can see it on the screen behind me, but for listeners, I'm going to read it out. It's all the W's, www, Elizabeth, ALIZ, Elizabeth. Yes, well, you know how to spell Elizabeth, don't you? Yeah, Queen Elizabeth, Elizabeth Minor, Miner, Miner, elizabethminer.net. And your book is called The Entrepreneur Advantage, Emotional Intelligence for Building and Growing a Business. And it's published by who and where is it available?
It is published by my own publishing house, Thrive This Day, and it is currently available on Amazon in all the countries and soon to be distributed in paperback worldwide.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. And Entrepreneur Advantage, Emotional Intelligence for Building and Growing a Business. Please do dip into emotional intelligence. I've got to say to you, viewers and listeners, it is a fascinating subject and you'll find it so much beneficial. Now, let's get back to questions. I'll come back to the book in a moment, but first, how can we convince viewers and listeners that EI, emotional intelligence, see, I was dropping the emotion bit, EI is not some silly soft skill, but brings the business real benefits, How do we make that intangible EQ become tangible? Do you have a simple formula for the return on investment?
I do not have a simple formula for that, because this is kind of like nailing Jello to a tree, right? But that said, here's the thing: when you understand the thought processes that go into decision making or evaluating a risk, and when you take the time to actually document all that, you can then start to learn from that, and you can use those tools going forward in other situations, right? So there's a gentleman by the name of Ray Dalio. He is a very, very well-known businessman, very successful, and he does those types of things, decision logs for all decisions made by his leadership. You can start to try and do some measurement in that way. You can understand who's best in what circumstances. Those types of things you can start to measure, but really it is in not only whether you're successful or not, but how you deal with the lessons that come from things not having the result that you desire. Because that in and of itself requires a certain level of emotional intelligence to get the lessons so that you can go to the next level just with that much more understanding. So, it's one of those things that even if it's not a cure-all. And even if you don't, because now you have a high EQ, now all success will be yours. It is in a fashion, because when you don't get the results you're looking for, you do get the lesson. If you can't listen to the lesson, that's a wasted failure, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. And that sort of belies a question or something there, because to go into emotional intelligence, you've got to be prepared, I think, to be honest with yourself, to know the impact that you have on people. And that one is the one I found the hardest, because, well, okay, I've got the age group gravitas, so I can tell people. Sometimes they don't like it, do they? But
Yeah.
do you know that you're a bit of a tosspot, or whatever it may be? I know I'm not as blunt as that, but you've got to know, to be really into emotional intelligence, be prepared to accept what people are saying about you, haven't you?
Yeah, and I think that one of the things with that is to figure out why, because I think you have to be gentle with yourself, because you might find out some things about yourself, but when you go back and look at why, number one, be gentle with why, because sometimes there's some history, familial history, or things that have happened in your past. But then to be able to work with that can allow you just this tremendous amount of empathy when you come across these people in your future, in your path. And so you can then begin to not only kind of change the way you appear and interact with the world, but you can also help others in that way.
Yeah, excellent. Elizabeth, let's go back to your book, which obviously you can see on the screen behind me. You are saying it's the entrepreneur's advantage. Now, how does that advantage work practically in building and growing a business?
Well, the cover has a pair of sneakers on it, because the entrepreneur journey has been called a marathon, not a sprint, right? And that requires a whole bunch of emotional intelligence. How do you get off the ground, deal with the naysayers, deal with all the things that come with starting a business and making something out of nothing, right? Making something out of an idea. So all that requires a certain amount of emotional intelligence. And then going the distance and staying the course. There are going to be times when things are an epic failure. And how do you deal with that, right? There's going to be times when things are an epic success. How do you deal with that? What's more important, and what entrepreneurs have more days of, are the days when it's neither a success nor a failure. And how do you manage that? And how do you know when to go seek help? Do you accept help? Can you put aside any ego so that you can go and get the help? Can you separate the wheat from the chaff and get information from feedback properly? Can you hire well? All those things. If you have a very strong emotional intelligence, all those things will play out. And that is the advantage. And that's what I think is tripping up more entrepreneurs. It's not the industry or the funding, because there are people that are well-funded that are epic failures. And there are people that are bootstrapping that are epic successes. And, it's not what they did with the money. Well, it is, but it's how did they think about the money? How did they manage the money? What were they feeling about the money? How were they, moving through the journey? Were they fearful? Were they using it in an abundance? All those types of things. And what kinds of decisions were they making? Were they higher risk takers because they had more money? Were they lower risk takers because they had less money? What went into their assessment of risk? All that is emotionally intelligent based.
Brilliant. Yes. Now, Elizabeth, can I ask you a today question?
Sure.
In your career and your research, you must have seen entrepreneurism at all social levels. Do you think in the world we're becoming more socially conscious, or is there still a very wide gap with the profit first people ruling the roost? And how can emotional intelligence help to develop a fairer community?
So there's always going to be profit first, right? There's always going to be those corporations, and that is consumerism, that is capitalism, that is part of what the world is. However, we're seeing more of these socially conscious companies. We're seeing the Patagonias, we're seeing the Tom's shoes, right? We're seeing companies that are saying you can be for profit and for purpose. And it is a possibility. And I think there's a huge shift these days that consumers are more concerned about where their money is going and what those companies are supporting. And I think that because of that, we're getting more permission to, put more of ourselves out there into our companies and saying this is important. And then, of course, with the millennials coming through, they don't want anything to do with you if you don't have a cause and a purpose with you. So there is, and I know that that's a generalization, please, hold the comments, right?
No,
But,
it's true.
there is a very much, there's a movement in that direction. And then, of course, post-COVID, did we see what happened with the restaurant business? There were people buying gift certificates for restaurants, not because they needed the food, not because they needed the gift certificate, but because they wanted to support the companies.
Yeah.
Goodwill is now getting a better name, I think. And so there's going to be more of that going forward. People are going to go out of their way to support the companies they believe in. And I think that is shown in this COVID time. And I think that will continue moving forward.
Well said, well said. Elizabeth, I like to give my guests 3 wishes, you don't have to carry them with you, back on, you can just give me them back now. If I was to give you those 3 wishes for entrepreneurs to understand the advantage and the value of embracing emotional intelligence, what would those 3 wishes be?
Oh gosh, I wish they would give themselves the time to explore it, the permission to be vulnerable about some of the things that are driving their behaviors that are maybe benefiting or burdening their businesses. And gosh, the third wish, just give them the kindness to be gentle as they go into this, because there's a lot that drives our behavior that might not be something that you want to look at, but I promise you, if you look at it, you can move it and you can make it so that it does not burden your business and actually allows you to be a better business person. And I wish that people would do that for themselves.
Absolutely brilliantly said. I like that word, kindness, Well, sadly, I've got to be letting you get on with your nomadic life in a minute. That's my first today, dear diary. I met my first digital nomad. In this dynamically changed world, entrepreneurism is key, but sadly many fail. My guest today, Elizabeth Miner, has a strong case for how that failure rate can be changed to the good. I'm with her on that. Thanks, Elizabeth, for a great interview.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.